Hello everyone, it is time for this week's live stream. I want to thank my sponsor Fritz Aquatics for supporting this channel. Rogers Food is a frozen food that you can offer to your fish. You put it inside a feeding device of some kind and let the fish bite the food off of it because it does not blow around in the tank and keeps it where you need it, near the fishes. Coral Magazine is out this issue. If you haven't seen it yet, it should be on the Miller's Reef website, and if it's not yet, I will put it there. Also, it is available in your local fish stores. This is the latest coral. We're working on the next one, which will be about, I don't even want to tell you yet. So I'll tell you in a few weeks. It'll come out the end of December, early January. But for now, let's focus on substrates and seabeds. If you're needing some help with your aquarium, I do offer consultation services. I will help you one-on-one through video chat. You can choose what device you want to use, and I can help you figure out what's going on with your aquarium. Hi everyone, it's been weeks and I have been AWOL, right? I've been traveling a lot. So I'm back and I released a couple of videos and another one will probably drop tomorrow. And that will be about my trip to Boston and then and to Tidal Gardens. That was really cool. I actually have to clean up the video. It's kind of a bummer. It's so funny. Let me just tell you this as a little precursor. Tidal Gardens is somewhere I've never been. I've always wanted to go. I've watched his videos for years. I've met Than at many different events, but I'd never walked through the building. And it was dead silent. I was like, oh my God, I don't need a microphone. This is fantastic. Which was 100% wrong. And that's because the iPhone picks up the ambient lack of sound and makes it sound noisy and kind of ruined all of my narration. So I will either clean it up or re-narrate everything. But I should have I mean, here's the thing. When everyone says, do you need a microphone? Always use a microphone. And I should have listened to my own internal voice, because the fact is that the microphone would have made everything perfect. And instead, now I got to go clean it all up, which is such a bummer because that place was dead silent. Amazing. I don't even know how many gallons are in that building. I'm going to assume 10,000 plus in the aquariums. And you could stand by these giant 500-gallon aquariums. Didn't even hear a ripple. It was just so quiet. It was so amazing. And it was so clean. And every place that sells corals and fish should look like this place. It's amazing. So anyway, that video is coming very, very soon. And then I wanted to tell you a couple of things that are in the news. I stuck them in this video's description already. Something that happened a few days ago was that OI, who stands for OI? OI released over 300 yellow tangs in the Oahu Reef, which is, they've been captive bred and they had a surplus and they put them back into the ocean. It's huge good news that it was able to do something like this. And there's been a lot of opinions, strong opinions, both for and against. So one of the upcoming articles in the next issue of Coral Magazine will be getting into that. But I just wanted to let you know that when they put these yellow tangs in the ocean, they didn't just go get them out of a tank and take a net and throw them in. Number one, it was requested. Number two, it was certified and approved by the correct government agency that would inspect them and make sure there was no chance of putting disease into the ocean, make sure that it wasn't going to cause a problem with genetic diversity. So it's really cool. And, you know, bottom line is it's a proof of concept to raise them from eggs, to grow them out. We've done that now for years, fortunately, and we're able to get some for our aquariums since you can no longer get them from Hawaii the regular way, right? That's been shut down for years. But to put some in the ocean is a proof that it can be done if for some reason someday our oceans were depleted of yellow tangs for some weird reason. There is a possibility of replenishing what was lost. So to see this happen, to observe how it's going to work, how many will survive kind of a thing, we'll get into all those details, but this was the feel-good story of the week, putting some yellow tangs in the ocean instead of taking fish out of the ocean. So I thought that was really neat. And then another fish that was in the news this week, ORA is now releasing the Oman clownfish. The Oman clownfish comes from the Oman Ocean, which I have actually had the personal opportunity to swim in once in my life when I went to Dubai. And this clownfish has been absolutely unavailable to us as hobbyists forever, as far as I can tell. And, occasionally one rare one would get into the trade, but it was just not available. Now, ORA is producing them, and we were able to get this specific clownfish. So it's kind of a darker fish, and it's cool. So if you're always hoping to have this particular species, the story is in this video's description. And then I am wearing a shirt today, and let me zoom this out for a second. Can you see that? I am wearing a Reef Bum shirt. So the reason that I'm mentioning that today is because the Reef Bum podcast is coming to an end. The final episodes will be in December, and that is it. The show is done. So if you have been missing a few of Keith's episodes, you have an opportunity now to tune in and catch up and see what's going on as he shuts it down. He has decided he wants to do other things with his life, and he's not going to do the weekly show that he's been doing for so many years. So, of course, I needed a shirt. So I want to let you know that. And then I need an opinion from you guys. Oh, actually, I want to talk about two things first. And then I want your opinion. I was watching Netflix this week, and I came across two shows. And one is for you adults that I was curious if any of you guys are watching it, if you're going to watch it. It's called Arcane, and it's an anime-based cartoon for adults that, I just wouldn't put kids in front of it. That's all I'm trying to say. And I really am enjoying it. There are apparently 2 seasons on Netflix. I started season 1, and I'm really liking it, and I was wondering if you guys liked it. And then the other show that I saw this week that you can definitely watch with your kids was called Harold and the Purple Crayon, which sounds like such a dumb name. But I was like, I gotta watch this because it starred Chuck from the the actor from the TV show Chuck that I liked so long ago. And I've liked him in other stuff too. And I was like, I gotta see this. What is this about? And it was so good. And I already called my son and told him, you gotta watch it with my grandson. So if you're looking for something to watch this week, that's something new. All right, see, I don't only talk about fish stuff, but today we are going to talk about fish. But before I jump into the popular reef fishes that I made a list of today, I wanted to ask you your thoughts, and I need your insight. So in the chat now, if you're watching this later, be sure to comment in the video's comment field. What should I do with my older videos that I want to release? I've been wanting to do this for a while, and I'm just not sure how to handle it. So here's the thing. I've been to a lot of places over the years. For example, I went to Dubai back in, I think, 2019, and I have so much footage. And when my family was visiting in town, I just happened to notice on my phone, it did one of those things where it puts together all your videos and pictures into a little short video. It was not short by any means. It was probably 25 or 40 minutes long of what it chose to use of all the footage I shot of my trip to Dubai, and it was really, my son enjoyed it. He was like, this is great, and I was thinking, do I make a big long video of it? Do I chop it up into pieces? What do you guys want? Do you enjoy the long form videos? Because that has always been my go-to. When I did the Aquashella video recently, it was 40 minutes long. Most people do something that's 8 minutes or less because they, quick attention span. But do you want me to do these longer ones? Because I'm going to start pasting them together and start getting them out off my phone. And I know they're not like it just happened now or it just happened a couple of months ago. Yes, it happened 5 years ago, but I still want to share these different experiences. And I want to know how you would want to receive those. So I know that's kind of open-ended, but that's because I want your input, and I don't want I want your imagination to run wild. So if you think it should, a big thing should be broken up into pieces, I could consider that. If you want super long, I can consider that, or I can just take the absolute best of the best and shorten it down to almost nothing, which I think is such a waste of time. It's like, why even bother if you're not going to get the full experience? But that's my opinion, and I want your opinion, so please do let me know. All right. So let's talk about some popular reef fishes. I grabbed a few photos from my website because when it comes to putting fish in a reef aquaria, and I'm going to disappear. It's just going to be pictures of fish now. If you are looking for something to put in your tank for your reef aquarium, I always choose reef safe fish. And when I say reef safe, that means that you can put it in with most livestock and not have issues. Doesn't mean that some of the fish I'm about to show you potentially could not be nibbling. I mean, they could nibble on some things, but will they decimate and destroy your reef? No. Will they have an affinity for a certain thing? Yeah, that's possible. You might even say, oh, well, if I want this fish that I love so much, I can never have zoanthids. I just can't, because it's going to keep chewing them up. And then you just decide to run a reef without zoanthids. Okay, that's it. You can still have a reef tank. You just are limited one type of coral species from your aquarium. If you're a huge zoanut, you would not put this fish in your tank. That's all there's to it. You would put something else. But I just wanted to give you a kind of a upfront heads up of what I'm talking about before we jump into this. So without further ado, let's just jump to this fish, since we just talked about it. So the yellow tang, and I know it's not a great picture, and I have much better pictures, but this is just what I had handy. The yellow tang is a very popular reef fish. It was something that you could get very inexpensively back in the past. And the benefit of it was, number one, it was bright yellow swimming through your tank, so it's iconic. It also can help with some nuisance algae in the tank, which is always nice. And they're very active. They swim in groups, which is really pretty if you can get yourself a few. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the show, there have been there's less of them available than there were in the past, because the fisheries in Hawaii, where the yellow tang comes from, were shut down. They were shuttered because of, well, basically there was a type of peer pressure that was put on the legal system. They did everything they could to try and shut the fishery, and they finally succeeded. To this day, we continue to hope that these fisheries will reopen, because the actual population of yellow tangs has not been harmed by the aquarium trade whatsoever. And the funny thing is, if you live in Hawaii and you want to eat yellow tang, you can eat 20 a day if you wanted, and they don't care. But if you want to put 20 out into 20 aquariums to live for 20 years, that's evil and terrible and bad. So, and I know, I'm not trying to pick a fight. I'm just saying that's basically summed up. That's where the viewpoint is. It's unfortunate, but a few years ago, the aquarium in Hawaii, I'm still trying to think what OI stands for. They went ahead and they were able to crack the code and breed them and make eggs, and the eggs were produced, and the eggs were turned into small fish. And now this day we can get yellow tangs from companies like Biota, and we can put them in our tank, and they can grow into large adult specimens, and we can enjoy them. So having a yellow tang in your aquarium is very popular, but now they are more expensive. And, you know, there's a lot of opinions about, are they good enough? Are they the equivalent? Are they still as good as wild caught? Well, since wild caught's not available, this is the best alternative. So I just like to point out that the yellow tang is something that you might want to have in your aquarium, if you keep in mind that your tank should not be too small for a tang. Now, when it comes to tangs, there are lots on the available, lots of different kinds. This is one I showed you. Here's another one. This is the one that eats zoanthids, the blue hippo tang or the regal tang. This one here is very bright blue, very pretty, enjoyable. I had a very small one in my anemone cube that was 1 inch when I got it, and grew to about 4 or 5 inches in size. And eventually I moved it out of the 60-gallon cube, but I didn't have any issues with it doing any damage to anything. But historically in the past, when I had other blue tangs in my 280-gallon tank, they were swimming really fast. They were spawning, because that's what fish do when they want to make more of themselves. And they were splashing my lights and shattering my bulbs, and it was kind of a big pain for me, which I didn't really enjoy. But they were very pretty to look at. They help a little tiny bit with algae control, but I wouldn't say that they're a huge benefit. Instead, I would suggest the white tail coal tang or the white tail bristletooth tang. These are workhorses. They will be chewing on your substrate. They will be chewing on your rock. They will be kissing the glass. They're constantly looking for algae. They're always on the move. They don't sit still. It's a very, very beneficial fish when it comes to taking care of your aquarium. And if you want to have one in a smaller tank, like a 60-gallon, a 75, a 90, you definitely can. But if you had something small, like a 7-gallon, no, you may not have one. If you have a 29-gallon, that's still pretty small. I would say no. If you had a 30 or 40 gallon, you might get away with that while it's a juvenile, but as it grows, it wants to swim. It's an open swimmer. So we want to make sure that tangs have plenty of room to do what they want to do. There's others that come to mind. For example, hey, Jack, don't start barking. We're doing the show right now. One that I finally got for myself after so long wanting one is the Achilles tang. I don't have a picture of it handy, sorry. But the Achilles is beautiful, but it needs a ton of swimming space, and it needs, a lot of flow. It can literally swim right in front of a powerhead as if it's doing exercise on a treadmill. That's just, they want to swim. Another fish that I saw when I was at the Long Island Aquarium is the Sohal tang, which is another really pretty fish. It has a lot of nice looks to it, but it has a lot of personality, and it can be very aggressive, and it can be aggressive toward all your other fish, and it needs, again, a lot of swimming space. So, you want to keep that in mind. When you're thinking about different fish you want to get, we want to make sure that they are going to work with the livestock you have, that the tank is going to be big enough for them, that they are going to tolerate their neighbors. These are all important things to know. Okay, a little fish that I think is nice to have in an aquarium, and there are lots of opinions on this one too, is the Sixline Rass. Now, I had this one who I named Spike because of his dorsal fin, and he was okay in my tank, and he helped a little bit with things like flatworms and such, but he was semi-aggressive toward his tank mates, and it could have just been he needed more space and he wasn't very happy in there. I can't say for sure. It's the only time I had a Sixline Rass. But if you're wanting a fish that looks like this, but is more docile, I would get the 4-line Rass or the 8-line Rass. I don't know why 6 lines makes it so mean, but if you can find a 4 or an 8, that would be the better choice for a tank mate. They are very pretty to look at. They swim around in the tank all day. I believe this is the type of wrasse that will sleep in the rockwork, and I'm not positive, it's been so long, but I think it cocoons itself in a bubble. Some wrasses do that when they sleep to protect themselves. Other wrasses like to dive into the sand, like this one, the yellow Corus wrasse. This one here is a very, very nice animal, especially when you get them tiny, because the smaller they are, the more they fit into your corals to eat the pests. So if you had a problem with flatworms in your tank, or red bugs, or spiders, or these are different pests we've talked about in the past. The yellow Corus wrasse is a really good choice to go in there and nibble them up right off the coral skeleton. So if you got a larger one, you'd have a problem, but the small ones fit in everywhere. The larger one can't. So the problem is he's, number one, not going to be able to get to the pests you want him to get to because he can't fit. And when they get larger, they get hungrier, and they actually can be eating things like your snails that you like for keeping the glass clean, and that you like to have algae control. And they just get so hungry, they'll just hit a snail off the glass, and then they'll eat the meat right out of the shell, and suddenly you have an empty shell, and you're thinking, what happened? And the yellow Corus wrasse just swims around innocently. Now, this fish is super fun to look at. There's another one that's similar with a white belly called a lemon meringue wrasse. And they both swim around all day and dive in the substrate the moment your lights turn off. They have some kind of an internal clock. They know exactly when your lights will shut off after they've gotten used to your tank, obviously. It's not like you can just put it in and they know it's 9 p.m. or something silly like that. But they will learn the routine. They understand, if your tank lights were turning off at like 11:30, they will be hovering over a spot that they think looks good in the substrate. Around 11:29 and a half, and they'll swim in a small circle, and then literally as the light is kicking off, that thing goes into the sand like a lightning bolt and is completely protected for the night while it sleeps down there. That is an important thing to keep in mind, that if you have a bare bottom tank, this would not be a good fish to have in your aquarium, because they need to sleep in the sand and they deserve it. That is literally their habitat. So if you have a tank right now that's bare bottom, I wouldn't get this fish. I know sometimes people think, well, I can just put a container of sand in the corner, which to me is like putting a litter box in the kitchen. I just don't think it looks good, but everyone has their own opinions of how they want to do things. I think a tank looks so much better with sand in the bottom, And having the entire substrate everywhere, the wrasse can pick a different spot to sleep in every single night and be very, very comfortable. Speaking of yellow things, I do have the clown goby. This little guy here is super cute, is great for nano tanks. If you have a small tank and you need a little tiny fish, something that's bright yellow that you can see, this little guy would be a welcome addition. They like to perch on top of the rock or on top of corals and just kind of look at you. They can do a little bit of damage when they are in breeding mode and they want to lay some eggs. And they may gnaw off some of the meat off of a SPS coral, for example, so they can put their clutch of eggs on the skeleton of the coral itself. That is literally what this fish does. It will not destroy all your corals, but if you're wanting one that's a little friendlier and less aggressive toward your corals, then you could get the green goby instead. The green goby is similar to this one in shape, but it has some stripes on its body vertically. And that one, as far as I know, doesn't do any damage of any kind whatsoever. I don't even know how it makes eggs for itself, since it doesn't copy the yellow clown goby. But that is definitely going to be up to you. Well, we are moving along so quickly. Let me show you another fish that I really like, and that is the target mandarin. Now, in this case here, I have two mandarins. They were in my 280-gallon tank. They were both targets. They have those bullseyes on them, basically. And they were doing this weird dance where they were holding on to each other. And I thought, wow, that's so cool. And then it turns out, no, they were fighting. They did not like each other. They would bite each other on the gill and sling them around the tank or drag them around. And I was like, oh, I did not realize that I had two similar ones here. I thought it was a male and a female, and I was incorrect. It was two males, and they were fighting. So if you wanted to get target mandarins, if you can't find a mated pair, then maybe stick to just getting one. Mandarins, I think, are very easy to care for because all they're going to do is eat the bugs in your tank. If you are concerned that your tank does not have enough food for them, that's a valid concern. And you should make sure that you have a lot of rock work for them to scour over because they're going to forage all day long looking for food. If you can get tank-raised species like the ones that came from ORA or maybe biota, these mandarins are trained on pellet food, and you can put in the exact same food that they were using at the facility in your tank, and then the mandarin can slurp it up. I did something many, many years ago to make sure that my mandarins could get food. When I discovered that they did like pellet food, I was shocked because mine were wild caught. And so I made something called the Mandarin Diner. And if you type in Mandarin Diner on this YouTube channel, you'll find my video from, 2005. It's super, super old. But I took an olive jar. I took the olives out and I put some pellet food in there and I laid it down on the substrate, down low in the tank, on the substrate, on the sand, where the opening of the jar was even with the sand so that the mandarin could glide across the sand and right into the jar, get some pellet food, and then swim back out. And this worked fantastically because I had so many active, aggressive eating fish, not aggressive fish, but aggressive eating fish that were devouring all the food. And so to have the ability to put pellet food in a enclosed area that tangs couldn't go steal and clownfish couldn't steal and angelfish couldn't steal was the best choice. And the mandarin would just go in there and the fish would be biting at the jar and frustrated that they could not get at this food. But the mandarin could swim in there and get whatever I'd put in there, whether it was frozen food that had been thawed out, fish eggs, pellet food. It just worked great. And so I was able to have 5 or 6 mandarins in my tank. Now, I showed you the target mandarins, but let me show you these mandarins. I've got another picture here somewhere. Let me find it. Oh, here it is. So these are 2 different types of the blue mandarin, or called blue-green mandarin. And these are absolutely stunning, and they also are much larger than the target mandarins. Now, the one on the left is actually a female, and she is in front of the body of Spock, so you can kind of see how big she is in relation to what size that mandarin was. And then the upper right picture, that's a male mandarin fish, and it's in front of that olive jar I mentioned to you before. So it would swim into there, get some food, and then back out like a pickup truck. Beautiful, beautiful fish. They are so nice to have. By the way, I haven't really gone into acclimation, all that kind of stuff, but I will mention that when it comes to mandarins, we don't acclimate them. We don't put them in quarantine because of their diet situation. The fact that they are such picky eaters that if you were to put them in a quarantine tank and try to keep them there for 45 days, you could end up with dead fish pretty quickly because they just can't get the food fast enough. It's just one of those things. Now, maybe it's possible with the biota fish because they're already hooked on DKI pellet food or mastic or something like that, and so maybe that would work. But generally speaking, the oily skin of this type of mandarin keeps them pest-free or disease-free. That's not 100%. That's just a general rule that usually they will be okay. If you get a mandarin, if you see one and you're going to buy it, really study it closely at the fish store and see what it looks like. And if the skin looks clean and smooth and there's nothing weird on it, you're probably going to be safe with putting it through something like Safety Stop and then put it directly in your tank. But if you see spots on its body like welts or something along those lines, then I would probably pass on it because you don't want to take that chance. Now, I've had mandarins in my tank that developed a disease later on, but then it cleared up on their own. I didn't have to do anything, which was great. So mandarins, I find, tend to be more robust in the fact that you can put them in your tank and not worry about introducing ick or something like that. You don't have to worry about that with them. That's my opinion. I want to just reiterate, because I have to bring this up anytime someone says the word mandarin. They are not a goby. There's no such thing as a mandarin goby. Anywhere you see a store that says mandarin goby, please hit them for me. Okay, don't hit them. Tell them, not a goby. Not a goby. Take a Sharpie, cross out the word goby. They are a dragonette. And they will never, ever, ever be in the goby family. So these are really nice to have in your tank. Now I'll go back to the Target one that I showed you. I got one of these, a green one, from an online vendor a few years ago. And I had 0 pod eaters in my 400-gallon reef. And so I was thinking, well, that fish is going to be well fed. And I went ahead and I, opened up the box and looked inside the bag, and it was really, really starved. Mandarins should look like these pictures you've been seeing. I'm going to show you the other picture again one more time. Do you see how their bodies are nice and thick and rounded? I mean, I know it's a little dark, but when a mandarin is starved, you will basically see the lateral line, or the rib, I guess you could say. The stomach area will be sunken in really badly, and the sides of their body are like ridges. It's really unpleasant to see, and it's discouraging. And when you find a mandarin like that that's that thin, it's probably not going to live. And so thinking I will rescue it, I will make it be okay, could be a pipe dream for some hobbyists. But others who have a very old tank like my own, with a lot of live rock and no one's in there eating all the pods, it could potentially find enough food if it has enough energy to pursue and hunt down the food. So I got myself a green Target mandarin. The one on the left there, it's greenish. The one on the right was more of an orange color, which was kind of fascinating because you almost never see an orange mandarin. But mine is a solid green with the targets on it, and it had those ridges on the side. The stomach was really sunken, and I was very worried for it. And I put it in my 400-gallon tank. It was down on near the substrate, and it kind of perched on a rock like a frog does. Just sat on this rock and didn't move for 3 days. Just sat there, and I thought, oh my God, you're just going to die. I mean, there's no way. You have to move and find food. You can't just stay here. And on the 3rd day, as I was watching it, it moved 1 inch. An inch! And I was like, okay, that's progress. And I thought maybe you found a pod 1 inch over. And then a few days later, it was starting to move into the tank, and then I never saw it. And then maybe every 2 months, I'd see it for a couple of minutes, and it went into the rockwork when it saw me, thinking I'm going to catch it again or something, and it was trying to avoid me, I guess. But to this day, I've had that mandarin now probably 4 years. It is very round and fat like these pictures here. It looks very healthy. It's still pretty shy, but like I said, I come near the tank, it swims away from me, which I think is kind of rude. It's basically saying I'm ugly, and it wants to get away from me, and I don't appreciate that. But if you wanted to keep a mandarin, those are some of the things I can tell you about them. And I would not put it in a small tank. I had one in a 60-gallon tank with all the anemones and clownfish, and I watched its stomach get thinner and thinner. I was like, that's insane. You have literally all the substrate, all the rock in that tank. How are you not getting enough food? And so I moved it into my 400-gallon, and it immediately fattened up again. So really, the bigger the tank, the more success you'll have with a Mandarin fish. Okay, let's talk about a fish that a lot of people want to have. A lot of people want to get the copper band butterfly fish because they say, oh, it'll eat the Aptasia. It's such a great tool to keep my tank Aptasia free. The problem is copper bands are very hard to keep alive. And I have bought my share of copper bands over the years. I've had luck with a few, and I've had bad luck with quite a few. So if you are trying to get one for your tank, first of all, having a tank full of Aptasia helps because they will then have the opportunity to eat a natural food for them. But they also like worms. They like any kind of small worms they can get into their beak. So if you are thinking you have a plethora of benthic fauna for them to devour, feather dusters and tube worms and the terabellid worms that live in the sand bed and spaghetti worms, which I think are really pretty, by the way, but a copper band might eat those away as well, and Aptasia, then putting one in your tank may work out, and the fish, if it learns to eat that food rapidly enough, could be okay. But notoriously, you get a copper band, and then within the first 10 to 14 days, or within the first month, it just seems okay, and then suddenly it's dead. So it's very, very discouraging because it's not an infinite supply of them in the ocean. There's a finite supply. And so for us to get a copper band that eats is the first rule when it comes to finding one. So when you go to the fish store and you're looking in the tank and you're looking at their copper bands, it's already been scooped out of the ocean, bagged up, put in a facility, then possibly through some kind of medication, and then shipped to another location, and then shipped to another location, and then finally it's in your fish store, and it was scooped up in a net and put in a tank, and it's been stressed. It's been handled by a bunch of different humans for the last couple of weeks. It may not have eaten very much because of the fact that it had to keep shipping from one destination to the next, and they don't like to feed fish and have them full of food go into a bag because they will poop into the bag and pollute their own water during transit, which could be a death sentence. So usually they don't give them any food before they start their trip, and then when they get to their destination, they could be too weak to hunt down food, or they don't have the right food source. There's just a few things to keep in mind. These are the scenarios that are really the truth for most fish. But the copper band being such a finicky eater, it's going to be hard to get a success story. So if you see one at the fish store and it's eating the food that they're offering, I always tell people to buy that fish and the food they used and use that food in your tank. And that way the copper band has an opportunity to consume that food in addition to the food you might already be using. So for example, let's say you're only using Roger's food, or there you go. But the fish store was using Larry's food, or it was using adult brine shrimp. Well, you're going to have to use your food plus the food that you saw in the fish store so that the copper band can continue to get a meal so it doesn't get thin. These fish are already pretty thin in the first place, but if they have enough food, the stomach area, which is the lower half of the fish, will be thicker, and also the meaty area over the eye would be rounded and not flattened or even sunken in. So if you see sunken in, if you see pinched stomachs, these are bad indications and probably would not be a good choice to purchase it. So you want to you want to make sure that you are prepared for this fish. Now, you might say, hey, it looks thin, but I can fatten it up. That's a great attitude, and maybe you can. If you happen to live in an area where you can get blackworms, you could put the blackworms in the tank every single day. You can grow more blackworms in a bowl in your refrigerator and have an ongoing food supply for this fish. And every day you feed it blackworms and the fish stays healthy and it's eating and it's doing well. And then hopefully it's finding natural foods in the tank for it to devour. And eventually you may be in the situation where you don't have to use blackworms anymore. Myself, I don't have access to blackworms here in Texas, but I was able to get frozen bloodworms, and I was using that initially with my copper band, and it was eating them, which was good. It was eating adult brine shrimp, which I poured in thousands into my tank, and then I was putting in the bloodworms every single night with the food, and then one day I realized that it was eating PE mysis. So every time I make a batch of food for my tank, every single night, I put PE mysis in there as well as the other foods I use, and that way my copper band will continue to get some food every single day. And when I pour the food in the tank, you can bet that fish is looking at all the food and is waiting for the exact type it wants and will only go after that one specifically. And I see that on a regular basis. You would think, oh, there's a cloud of food, I'll just swim into it. And nope, my fish is looking at the different pieces blowing around and says, there it is, that's the one I want, and goes after it, and then the next one, and the next one, and the next one. So that's what I do. I just wanted you to be apprised of this information, because if you just think, well, I can get one and it works out, unfortunately, you could get several that none of them work out, and then finally you get one that works. That happened to me years ago, and I just stopped. I was like, I'm not going to buy any more because I feel like I'm doing a terrible, disservice to this fish. But then after a while, after years, I was like, okay, let me try one more. And that one was a winner, and I was super happy about that. Another fish that can be tricky would be the flame angel. Now, the flame angel comes from Hawaii. It's another beautiful fish. And, by the way, I do want to mention that the copper bands now have been captive bred, so there is a new fish on the market, so to speak. And if you're able to get a captive bred copper band that's eating the food that the breeder is using, then that would give you a step in the right direction, which would make your life a lot easier. So the question is, where can you get captive brown copper bands? Flame angels, they have been bred in the past. I don't know if that's an active thing they're doing now, or it's just something they did and they're not doing now. But the flame angel has always been a very popular fish in the saltwater hobby. I've always enjoyed it. I think they're gorgeous. But it's a 50-50 chance of success. 50% that it will live, and then 50% that it will eat your corals. So if you're thinking, man, I really like this fish, it's bright red, it's active, it's got those purple stripes near its tail, I'm just like, I think it's so gorgeous, there's just a chance it won't work out. So here's the deadline. When you get a flame angel, you have an opportunity to, put it through quarantine and then feed it and hope that it's going to be okay. If it lives past 2 days, you've already gotten over the first hurdle. If it lives over 2 weeks, you've gotten past the second hurdle. And if it lives past 2 months, you've got a winner. So you got to go 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months. And if you can get through all of those benchmarks, then you already have an opportunity to have this beautiful fish in your tank. And then there's the chance it may eat some of your corals. But it might be a model citizen. It's a 50-50, it's a toss of the coin, and there's no way to know. Now, there was a really cool article about them in Coral Magazine a few years ago, and I never knew this until I was reading the article, that the black stripes on their body help identify if they're a male or female. And apparently, the stripes are so specific on their bodies that they're almost like fingerprints, and flame angels recognize each other based on the patterns on the body, which is just amazing to me. I can't even believe there's that much variation, because they kind of all look the same to me. But yeah, there is a really cool story. So if you are a Coral Magazine subscriber, you can go to the digital edition and you can look up the flame angel and learn all about it and learn more about what I'm describing. I think it was written by Scott Michael. So you might want to check that out if you have some free time. Now, I told you all about the flame angel, but the choice, of course, is to get something that's a little bit easier, and that would be the Coral Beauty. This Coral Beauty I got back in 2003 when I bought a 55-gallon aquarium, and half of its face and cheek was just burned off from really bad water quality. And I acquired it and the tank and everything, and I worked on everything to make everything as good as I could. And 9 months later, the fish looked like this, which basically looks perfect. I mean, there's a little bit of damage right there under the eye, but other than that, it looks great. And I was actually amazed that it was able to heal that much from what I saw. I was kind of thinking that's just the fish I got. I got it used, and it's, I'm rescuing it, so it's going to be what it is. The Coral Beauty, super reef safe. I don't know of it eating anything in a reef tank that's going to do damage to your corals. And so if you are thinking, I wish I could get a Flame Angel, but I don't want to take the chance, the Coral Beauty would be a great choice instead. Okay. What else do I have here for you? The Friedmani Doback is Doback, I hope I have that right, is such a nice little fish, but it is rather timid and reclusive. It tends to hide. It will come out to eat, but it kind of likes to just duck away into the rock work and be safe. But it's really, really pretty. And if your tank is big enough, you could have 2 or 3 and just enjoy their interaction. They have that cool black stripe across their eye, and they're not expensive, and I think they're really pretty to have. And then when it comes to other small fish, I really do like the Firefish, but these are known jumpers. So if you are not going to put if your tank is open, then this fish is going to jump out. It absolutely will jump out. And you could have 3 of these, 9 of these, 15 of these, and eventually you'll have 0 because they'll just jump out one by one for whatever reason. So having a screen top or a solid top on your aquarium is the best way of keeping them from jumping out. They are very small fish. They do this little twitching thing with that dorsal fin on its back, and they like to be in groups. They're really pretty. They come in different. This is the red one, and it's a really nice one. There's also the purple Firefish, which I think we usually just unless I'm mixing them up. And then there's the Hell Freaky. So it could be the red Firefish, the red Firefish, the purple Firefish, and then the Hell Freaky. I think that might be correct. It's been so long since I've talked about these fish, and my memory is fading on this guy. But these are really, really pretty. These are usually pretty expensive. I believe they're about $90 a piece. And I got 3 of them with Caitlin a few years ago to put in the 400-gallon, and we put them in, and we never saw them again. I don't know what happened to them. They just disappeared. So I think they're better off in a smaller tank, a smaller ecosystem, and I think they need to have more food. I don't think you can get away with 1 meal a day, or even worse, cutting back on feeding because you're trying to control some algae problem in your aquarium. When you do that, the fish that you have like these that rely on constant stream of tiny bits of food, plankton food, would probably die off pretty quickly in your aquarium. So if you wanted to get something like this fish, make sure that you're feeding 2 or 3 times a day and using very small sized food so that they can gobble it up in their tiny little mouths. I really like the Longnose Hogfish. Now, this is a funny fish to put in your tank because it doesn't swim around. It loves to perch on a rock and just sit there, and then it'll suddenly decide to move to a new spot, and it kind of just jets to the new spot and then sits somewhere else. So it could sit on a power head, it could sit on your cleaning magnet, it can sit on a rock, it can sit on the substrate, it can sit on the leather coral. I mean, it's just what it does. It likes to sit somewhere. I had one of these in my 29-gallon for a long time, and he did a great job of keeping my bristleworm population under control because it eats them. So if you are thinking there are too many bristleworms in my tank, and I don't want you to think there should be none in my tank. Bristleworms are completely normal, and they are helping clean the waste in your aquarium. But when you have 10,000 of them coming out of every pore of your rock, and they're just making, and it looks like the rocks are moving because there's so many worms, you need a Longnose Hogfish. You also might need an arrow crab too. And those 2 guys, the crab and this fish, will definitely eat away the majority of the population, but they will not eat it completely, so you'll still have some bristleworms in there to do their job, which is beneficial to the tank. I think they're really pretty, they're photogenic, they're fun. I did have one that was very large in my tank, and for some reason when I introduced my new copper band, it chased the copper band all over the tank. It was the weirdest thing ever. And because of that, I took my large Longnose Hogfish to Frank's, and I says, here, give this to someone else. I don't want it. And I got myself a tiny Longnose Hogfish and put it in my tank, and it had no problem with the copper band, and the problem was solved. So it could have just been that fish was adult size and was hungry and wanted copper band for dinner. I don't know what was going on, but it was unbelievable that a butterfly, such an active swimmer, was on the run from a fish that doesn't swim. It was just the weirdest thing ever. Another fish that's great to have in an aquarium is the Antheus. And I really like the lyre tails. I've always been attracted to the lyre tails. They're basically just a peach-colored goldfish. And in the natural reef, like in Fiji, there's thousands upon thousands on the reef. They're so beautiful. I'd love to have 100 in my tank. I've never tried. Whenever you do get Antheus, you should always have an odd number. 5 of them, 7 of them, 9 of them. But they need to be fed 2 or 3 times a day. So if you can set up an auto feeder that's feeding your tank regularly and your water parameters are not going to get completely out of whack because you've got great filtration, then this is a really nice addition to the tank. They're always out in the water column. They're visible. They're not hiding in the rocks, which is nice. The females are orange, like you see in this picture, and then the males are purple with a big dorsal spike on the top of their head. And they will regularly mate with their harem of females. So having one male and 5 or 6 females would be a nice set. And at one point I had got a different type called Bimaculatus, which were even prettier than these. They were probably the best looking Antheus I've ever seen in my life. And I was super happy to have them, but I was down to just feeding my tank once a day. I took off my auto feeders for some reason. And then I just noticed one by one, I had no Antheus. And I thought it was really strange because, they were always there and suddenly they weren't. And then I realized, hey, I wasn't feeding my tank nearly as much. So if you wanted to have Antheus, there's a couple things when it comes to lyre-tail that I want to share with you. I found that they are super quick acclimating fish. If you go with a slow method, you may not have it survive the acclimation. So if you're one of those people that likes to drip acclimate for 2 or 3 hours, it probably won't live. They are very active fish. They use a lot of oxygen. And so what I've always done with success is I get the fish, I will put it through safety stop because I always do with every fish I get. And then I will put it, I will cut open the bag and I will scoop some water out of the tank and pour it into the bag. And I do that every 7 minutes. And within 45 minutes, that fish is in my reef. And that has worked really well. When I went longer, the fish would die. They'd die right in the bag. It was unbelievable to me. Now, it's been years since I've had to acclimate lyre tails, but if I was doing it again, if I wanted to do something different, like a drip system that, like I said, some people like to do that, then I would recommend an air stone in the bucket the entire time during the drip. Maybe that will help. But I just find that, look, I bought the fish in Dallas, and it takes 45 minutes to drive home, and I had one dead in the bag by the time I got home. I was just like, I haven't even opened the bag yet. It's already dead. And so I went back to the store, and I said, look, you owe me a fish, and this time, please pump oxygen into the bag. Don't just squeeze in ambient air. Actually add oxygen, which they had, O2. And they went ahead and filled the bag, and I came home, and I did my rapid acclimation, and I had no losses. I've also ordered Antheus online from Live Aquaria in the past. No problems with that. Again, I stuck to a rapid acclimation and got them into my aquarium. So if you're looking for a pretty fish, this one is it, but make sure you feed it well. Okay, let's talk about clownfish. This is a not so great picture of my original true Perula that I bought back in 1998. And then I got the anemone probably in 2002. And she took to it immediately. And this was taken with a really old camera. But the reason I'm showing it to you is because you very rarely see people with a true Perula. Lots and lots of people have Ocellaris. And they have hybrids of Ocellaris. There's been so many spin-offs of tank-raised clownfish at this point that seeing a true Perula in real life is almost unheard of. But the true Perula is vivid orange. I wish I'd used a different picture, actually. But this one, you saw the whole body. They have that thick black marking around the white stripes, and they're great. It's one of my favorites. As a matter of fact, I chose true Perculas because of their vivid orange. They were so brilliantly orange. And people were getting every other kind of clownfish under the sun, and I was like, nope, this is what I want. And I think that people just, matter of fact, this was my profile picture on Reef Central for many, many years, because it was such a unique fish. Sort of like the Oman clownfish I was talking about from the Sea of Oman that no one has it. So if I had it, that would be my avatar. So another type of clownfish that you guys know I like is the skunk clownfish. And the reason I like the skunk clownfish is because they can live in a harem. And I introduced 11 into my tank, I think 8 years ago, and I still have 11 in my aquarium to this day. Every once in a while I do a head count, and I still get to 11, which is great news. They have a orange body. These are actually called tangerine skunk clownfish. They were raised by Pro Aquatics, I believe. Man, it was so long ago, I barely remember the details. But I introduced them into my tank. It's my most popular video on this YouTube channel with over 2.5 million views. And super easy to take care of. They just live in the anemone, and you just put food in the tank, and they come up and grab some food and go back down into the tentacles and stay safe all day long. So if you're looking for a harem clownfish, this is it. Now, I do want to mention, I mean, there's lots of other clownfish. There's the maroon clownfish, the lightning clownfish. I mean, I'm not going to go through the whole entire list, but certain ones like the clarky are like, they look like a bulldog, and they can be very aggressive, and they can bite you. And it's not, I mean, a lot of reef hobbyists have found themselves trying to clean their aquarium, and their clownfish is biting them and drawing blood. And I'm not a fan of that type of clownfish, and when one does try to bite me, I have two choices. Number one, I just leave my hand there so they can just bite every bit of it and realize it was pointless because I'm not going to give up. Or I try to thump them on the nose, which never works. I try so hard. It's like they come, they bite, I try to, flick them, and they're already gone. They're so fast. They're defending their territory. They're trying, they don't want your hand in the tank. I get it. But at the same time, I'm giving you a tank, I'm feeding you, I'm providing filtration, I'm doing everything to give you a long life, and you're biting me? That's just a problem for me. But if you're looking at different clownfish, find out their temperament before you buy it so you don't get an ugly surprise. And that way you can know what's going to work for you, and you can say, yeah, I need a fish that's aggressive and defends its territory. I need that in my life. It's like, all right, then get it. But if you're liking something docile and you like to be able to reach in your tank and flip over a snail and save its life and not get chewed up by a Tasmanian devil clown, that should be a real fish, by the way, then make sure you get the right kind. I do want to mention that maroon clownfish are also in the aggressive family, like the clarkies. And they also, when you're looking for clownfish, they're going to need somewhere to live. And invariably, they should live in a nice, big, healthy anemone. That is the best choice for many clownfish. And also keep in mind that certain clownfish need certain types of anemones. They don't all just like bubble tips. And if someone told you that, they're lying. Some might like long tentacle anemones. Some like carpet anemones. Some like bubble tips. Some want to live inside a giant clam. Which sounds insane, but I've seen it many times. And they will literally swim into the inlet and come out the outlet of a clam. And it's just like, how does the clam tolerate this? That's just crazy. And you'll see the clownfish resting on the mantle of the clam, and the clam doesn't slam shut and try to destroy it. Unbelievable. But I've also seen clownfish hang out near power heads and just call that home. They can be pretty silly. They can jump out of your tank. They do sometimes get spooked and jump. So again, having a screen cover in your aquarium could help protect against clownfish losses. All right, what else do we have? The lawnmower blenny. Such a fun fish to have in your aquarium. I like them a lot. This one here was with me for a super long time. It would hang out wherever it could, sit still. It would get on top of cleaning magnets. When I put the fish trap in my tank, it would go on top of the fish trap or in the fish trap just to sit there and look at me. It didn't want to be trapped. It just wanted to be It wanted to be seen. I really like them because of their personality. Just they look so fun. They kind of look like an uncle to me. And with their jowls. But some people buy them thinking they'll control the algae problem in your aquarium. And they may eat some hair algae, but they're not going to just decimate it. So if you're hoping it's going to just keep your tank nice and clean because you have one, because it's called lawnmower and you're thinking it's going to mow the lawn, don't get your hopes too high. It may help with certain things. My lawnmower blenny would do some weird things too, though. Like, for example, Spock would swim by, which is this giant Nassau tang. It's basically like a giant billboard, and the blenny would swim up to the glass and take a bite of the algae off the glass, the film algae. It would just do that and leave a lip print on there. Well, sometimes the blenny would swim up to Spock and bite the side of her body, trying to find some algae on this billboard of a fish, like I said, and Spock would turn so hard and fast and so mad that some fish dared to bite her. And, the blenny would take off like a rocket to get out of sight. And it didn't just happen once. It happened a few different times. But it didn't happen all the time, which was the most important part. Because obviously, I want my Nassau to be nice and healthy and happy. Okay. Cardinal fish, like the pajama cardinal fish or the Bengai cardinal fish, great fish to have inside your aquarium. They're really pretty. They are not aggressive. They swim in the open water columns, so they're enjoyable. They may, the pajamas actually, surprisingly, will hang out near your anemones. I don't see them swim into them like clownfish do, but they'll be so close you'd think that they were gonna. The Bengais actually will go into the anemone. It's unbelievable. I've seen it happen. It's shocking to me. But that's not their normal habitat. Don't expect it. Just don't be surprised if they do it. When they are born, both pajamas and Bengais both are mouth brooders, which means that the female and the male, spawn eggs, and then the male carries the eggs in its mouth, and then it's rolling the eggs around in its mouth the whole time, keeping them aerated until they become tiny little fish. And then they will swim out of the father's mouth, the male, and into the water column. And then they would normally go into the spines of a sea urchin, like a diadema urchin. And they'd live there and be nice and safe and try to eat plankton-sized food and hopefully grow into larger fish. In the video that you saw of the 20,000-gallon reef in Long Island recently, you probably saw the little tiny Bengai cardinal fish that were in those anemone tentacles. Those are, it's crazy to see fish smaller than 1/8 of an inch in a aquarium that's 30 feet by 14 feet. It was just unbelievable to me, and I loved it. I loved every second of it. So if you're wanting either of these to have in your aquarium, great choices. They're pretty. My pajama cardinal fish are super old. This was a picture of them when they were younger. That was one of them, and I've had them now probably nearly 10 years, and every time people come over, they said, I've never seen a pajama cardinal fish that big in my life. They're just ginormous in my aquarium. And I think I'm down to 4 of them. I had 5, and I have 4. Maybe I have 3. It's one or the other. But usually they're spread out in the tank, but then at night they're all in a group, which is kind of fun. And they do like to swim in the open water column, and then they kind of find a spot, and they kind of hover. So if you're thinking about some type of fish, I like to get juveniles. I like them small and young, and I put them in the tank and let them grow larger, and it gives me more time with that fish rather than getting an adult fish that is going to be it's going to have an attitude, it's going to be picky about its food, and it's going to not live as long in my aquarium because part of its lifespan's already elapsed. So I prefer to get the smaller ones, and getting fish from ORA or from biota is a great way to get a fish early on. Do I have anything left here? Okay, I think that is all the fish pictures. I don't see anything else. Yeah, so I do want to mention a couple others. The blue-green chromis is a very inexpensive fish, but they don't live very long. And you might buy 5 or 11 or 20, and you could enjoy them for a while, but then you'll notice one by one they seem to be dropping off, or they're getting picked off by the rest of the group. It's like they pick off the weakest one, and it just, at one point, you just don't have them anymore. And because of that, they're not really a great choice for a reef tank, only because they don't live long. So it seems kind of wasteful to me. And it seems like we should be able to come up with a different fish that will have more longevity. And I remember Matt Peterson had some fish he mentioned. It might have been the glass eye cardinal fish maybe or something. But he was like, why don't people get this one instead? Because you're going to have it much longer. And it's also out in the water column where you can see it. When I was visiting a event in Oklahoma once, one of the vendors had a tank set up filled with chromis. And I was like, how much for all of them? And he's like, seriously? I'm like, yes, I want all of them. I'm going to take them home to Texas. And so he gave me a price, and I bagged them up, and I brought them home, and I put them through safety stop, and I poured them in the reef. And I was like, here we go, confetti. This is going to be fantastic. And the funny thing is, Spock, my Nassau Tang, turned black from lips to tail and went into the corner and would not come out for 3 days. She was furious that there was all these little fish everywhere in the tank, and she let me know how she felt. And I thought, wow, is she going to come out of the corner? Is this going to resolve itself? And it was finally on day 4 where she regained some of her color, and she started swimming around, and she dealt with the crowds, but she was not happy about it. And then over time, like I said, they just dwindle away, and then you're down to 5, and then you're down to 3, and then you have 1. So not the world's best choice for fish in your aquarium, but if you're looking for a lot of activity, if you're wanting something that you know is going to be a short duration, it could be a nice choice. And like I said, they don't break the bank. A lot of people like to buy the Diamond Watchman Goby because it can clean the sand. It's actually not cleaning the sand. It's eating food out of the sand bed. But I got to understand why you'd say it's cleaning the sand. It's making it better. So if you were adding one to your tank because you want your sand to look nice all the time, that's okay. That's a normal thought. But it could be eating some beneficial bacteria, as it's sifting through everything, because it's going to eat all it can, obviously, to survive. And then it's out of its gills is just going to be grains of sand that are clean and devoid of life. And the twin spot blenny is another fish. I didn't find a picture from my Critter ID section, but it's a nice little blenny. Works great in small tanks. If you're looking for small fish and small aquariums, blennies are always a good choice. Also, the neon gobies are adorable, and they're like this big. I mean, they're just itty-bitty little things. But the problem is they can go right through the teeth of your overflow, even if it's an all-in-one, and they'll be on top of the sponge filter in the back, or they're down, under the return pump, which is kind of pointless because, you want to enjoy your fish. But if, I told Joe with his 20,000-gallon reef, you need some neon gobies in here, and he just looked at me. And then the Royal Grama. I showed you the Friedmani earlier. The Royal Grama is a really pretty fish. There's also the, I feel like it's called Purple Pseudochromis. It kind of looks like a Royal Grama a little bit. So the difference between these two fish, the Royal Grama has, purple on one end and then yellow on the other, and the colors kind of merge, or it's a gradient. But the other fish, it's like a straight line, like they took half of one fish and half another and glued them together. It's funny that they're just so completely different. The Royal Grama is reclusive. It likes to be by itself. If you were to have 2 or 3, they tend to fight. But they also, if the tank is big enough, they'll have their own individual territories. And so you could actually, like in my tank, I could have 2 or 3 in my 400-gallon, and that would be nice. But they wouldn't stay in a group, and they wouldn't be swimming around shoaling. It would be nothing like that. And that's it. That's my list for today, guys. I hope that you enjoyed what we talked about today. And of course, I'd love to know what your choice of a great reef fish would be. There's hundreds. I went with ones that popped into my mind that I would consider putting in an aquarium, but that does not mean that this is a representative of all of the choices out there, because there's so many. There are so many. I didn't even talk about fairy wrasses, and there's tons of those. I'm not a big wrasse guy in the first place because, number one, they are known jumpers, and I have an open top tank. And so I've chosen not to get lots of wrasses, but I have had different ones, like the mystery wrasse was kind of nice to have for a while, till it started eating things I cared about. Like the mystery wrasse, it's pretty, but it eats cleaner shrimp. It eats skunk shrimp. It could eat hermit crabs. It could eat some snails too. I've seen it happen. The Melanurus wrasse is a pretty one, I think. Well, there's also the leopard wrasse, which is really pretty, and I've tried that twice with no luck. Put it in the tank, never saw it again. It's like, really? Just like that? Come on, It's like, I know it's a big tank, but I would think it would find a spot, and then it would get used to it, and then I'd get to enjoy it for the rest of my life. So sometimes it just doesn't play out like you'd hope. But yeah, anyway, that's my list. How are we doing on time? Oh, okay, good. So we've been talking for more than an hour, and there's 92 of you here right now. Thank you very much for tuning in. Aw, thanks, Jeff. He just sent a super chat. He said, "Thank you, Mark, playing your live stream for all the customers in the store. I hope I'm not driving them crazy." Jason Langer says, "Not a Rass guy. Boo." You know, there was a guy, Bradley J. Cyphus, and I think his name was something like Rass Guy on Reef Central back in the day, and his tank was filled with all the different wrasses. I mean, they're pretty. It's just not my choice. I would much rather have a ton of Antheus than have a ton of wrasses. That's just, personal preference. Just like you might say, I want all the clownfish. I like them all. I'm going to put all the different kinds in my tank. I wanted to mention this earlier, that you don't want to have lots of different types of clownfish in your tank because they usually will not get along. And people try it. They've been trying it for years. And invariably, you'll end up dwindling down to just a pair because the most aggressive pair will chase away all the rest. My friend Tammy had an 800-gallon tank, and she had 4 different pairs of clownfish, and she thought, man, the tank's 10 feet long. I can definitely have different pairs. And she had one pair that systematically would hunt down and try to evict all the others out of the tank. And she had to move them into the sump and into multiple tanks just to protect them from that one pair. So it's just something to keep in mind. And, I showed you the harem that I put in my 400-gallon. You've seen those, the skunk clowns. That's fine. But if I was trying to put all different types of specialty clownfish in my tank, that'll only look good for a little while, and then the fight will begin. And when I talked with Randy at BRS, I said, you guys did a video on that, and you told everyone you could combine them, and that doesn't work. He goes, no, it didn't. And every week we're taking out the ones that are being hunted down. We're rescuing them. He says it's such a pain in the butt. My anemone cube, I did put in 14 or 16 clownfish I got from my friend Tammy, who raised them from eggs, which was really neat. And even and those were all from the same clutch of eggs. It was literally a ball of clownfish that we poured into my tank, and they stayed in a ball for 3 days, which was great. I love that. That's so neat looking when they huddle up in a ball. It's a protection thing that they do. But then as they get comfortable, they swim into the tank and they find their little spots. But then a few of them were more aggressive and a few of them were super timid, and they were swimming for their lives trying to stay alive. And I could put my hand in the tank, and the timid fish would swim into my hand for protection, and I would just carry it and put it in my frag tank. And I have 3 of them in my frag tank to this day. Now, when the anemone cube goes back up, I'm really thinking about grabbing those 3 and the 12 or whatever that I have inside my temporary tank, put them all together at once in their brand new tank and see if they all get along, because that would be really nice for me and allow me to declutter, because I've been wanting to get them in a group. But they're all of the same family, and that's what I'm trying to indicate. They were all from the same clutch of eggs, and so they were the best chance of keeping them as a group. But if you're trying to get a couple of Picassos and a couple of Lightnings and a couple of Bullet Hole and a couple of Nakeds and a couple of this, and you're just trying to put all these different ones in there, that looks great at shows like Reefapalooza, Mac, Reef Stock, where a vendor brings in a ton of different fish. It looks really neat for that day or 2 or 3, but long term that doesn't work out. It just doesn't. And if someone's able to pull it off once in a blue moon, that's always a miracle. But it's not. It's the exception to the rule, and so I wouldn't count on it, and I wouldn't recommend it to you. All right, let's do some question and answers here. I'm going to look at your comments and see if I can answer some stuff for you. Also, let me adjust this a little bit because I feel too far away. So, here we go. Let's look at see what's got in the chat here. Mike Spencer says, I couldn't carve out any time to attend the presentation, and I'm bummed that I missed it. If you're talking about at the BRS event, the Boston Reefer Society, that one they're going to release on video, so you can watch it later. Paul says, I got my Coral magazine today. Nice. he's talking about this one. You know, mine has not shown up yet. It's the weirdest thing. I really feel like one of my neighbors got it. So I also sell the magazine, so I get a stack of them each issue. And so I grabbed one here, and there's one on the wall right back there. That's it. That's the latest one. So also in this issue, in every issue, is the editor's page. That's me. And hey, it looks like my room. And my dad read it, and he says, I love that your sense of humor was in there. So my little tiny joke went well. But this issue had some really great stuff. And I really enjoyed it because a lot of it was about substrate, about having sand in the aquarium. And I just feel the sand is so important. So hopefully by the time you're done reading this, you're like, all right, Mark, I'll get some sand. Because it does more than just look like sand. It actually has a biological purpose for your aquarium. We even had a short article written by the president of Caribsea. I asked him, could you do something on, could someone from your company do a write-up on the different substrates and how they benefit the different livestock? And he did. And then I found out who it was. His name was Richard Greenfield. And he's the president of Caribsea and has been an avid diver and aquarium keeper for over 50 years. He studied marine geology at the University of Miami and the University of Florida, and currently resides in Fort Pierce, Florida, with his wife, 2 dogs, and a variety of rare plants. And he did this really, really nice 2-page article. And I was like, wow, I mean, it is not an infomercial. That was very important to me. I wanted to be talk about substrate, rather than being a sales pitch. And then we did this really cool story about Interzoo, which you guys know I went to last May, and I was super excited about it because it featured some of the new products that came to market this year, but it also allowed me to introduce some of my own pictures that I took at the show to share with you guys in the article. And so some of the photos you see were taken by me, which is always nice. It made the story even more rounded out. And then we had a great story about the crown of starfish, which can grow to be massive, 2 feet, 3 feet across. Insane. All right. I said I was going to look for questions. Here I get distracted. Kyle says, the most popular reef fish, the peppermint angelfish. So the peppermint angelfish, I would love it if someone was to breed that. Then I could put it in Caitlin's reef. The peppermint angelfish, when it's collected from the ocean, it's from 300 feet down. And it's very, very rarely collected. And usually it goes for $25,000. So that's a very expensive choice. Let's see if this camera will focus on me again. It's making me look all blurred out. Like, come on. There we go. Kevin says he has a cycling issue. He added a rescued clownfish to a new tank. Added XLM. Oh, okay. Brightwell's XLM a week ago. And no ammonia in a 150-gallon tank. Added a raw shrimp a day ago. Could have supplemented Dr. Tim's. Okay, so basically you're trying to create a cycle and it's not cycling. And you have a fish already in the tank. That's what you're telling me? Because if you're doing that, then you should use that product from Fritz, the Turbo Start, because that one is designed to add a ton of beneficial bacteria to the tank to get that bacteria base you need, and it can be done while fish are in the aquarium. So that would be my recommendation. I would take the raw shrimp out because we don't want to cause ammonia burn for your clownfish that you rescued. Okay, see a lot of comments about long videos. Because I had asked earlier what I should do with these, what I should do. Because I have the worst time making things short. And, actually, when I watch other channels and I see how they, they'll take their stuff and they shrink it down and they jump cuts, it actually irritates me. It's like, I couldn't even appreciate what you showed me because it just went by so staccato, so fast. And I just need more time to absorb it and to appreciate what it is. I mean, when you think about the amount of effort that goes into something and then you see it super fast, you can't appreciate it. You just can't. You need the time to really look at it and learn more about it. And so that's probably why my videos tend to be longer, because I can't just, tell you one sentence and move on. Oh, thank you, Jason. Oceanic Institute. See, I thought that was it, but that sounded wrong. The Hawaiian Pacific University, OI. That was what I was trying to remember. Mahmood says he's going to plan to build a tank that's 12 feet long by 32 inches wide by 31 inches tall. How big of a sump can I build for that? If you're able to come here locally to pick it up, we can make it big. The longest sump I've ever built was 8 feet long. And that was a big task. It was hard. Michael says, how do you feel about resealing a 250-gallon tank? When I bought it, it was used, and the guy said it didn't leak, so I water tested it, and it leaked in the bottom right corner. Should I try to reseal it? Is it glass or is it acrylic? If it's glass, you could potentially clean out some of the inside silicone to get to where the two pieces of glass touch. And then you could put a huge blob of silicone in there and then apply a chunk of glass into that to create more of a reinforcement, more of a barrier for the water to not get out through that spot where it leaked. So if you had, let's say it was the front corner, so you got the side glass, the front glass, the bottom glass, and you clean out all that silicone, and you apply a nice clean silicone inside, and then you press the glass in, and then you apply more silicone around the glass to seal in that brick of glass. That might be your solution. But you see, that's the thing. And I'll tell you, I've heard lots of different things over the years of people trying to do different things. But when you are putting more silicone inside an existing seam of two pieces of glass, you cannot get to the part where the glass touches the glass. All you can do is put an inside fillet. It's not enough. And that right there, it's just an interior barrier, but the part that's holding the tank together has already weakened to where water goes through. It already has air pockets and it has a weak spot. So that's concerning. Really, the best solution, the ultimate best solution, you cut apart the entire aquarium and you clean up all the silicone and you glue it completely together like you're building a tank for the first time. I mean, all the glass pieces are cut to the right size. But you would have now new silicone where the two pieces of glass touch, and you'd have where the silicone squished out, and then you apply the bead with your finger, and now you've got the fillet inside the seam, inside the joint, and you've got the inside where the two pieces of glass touch together. It's all filled with fresh silicone. That's really the best way to do it. Applying more on the inside, it's like caulk. You're just applying a reflective bead to hopefully keep the water back, but there is a path that can leak out. Now, that being said, Sanjay's 500-gallon aquarium was leaking and down low in the front, I believe. And he ended up reaching in there with a tube of cyanoacrylate, the super glue gel, and he squeezed it into the spot where the water would leak out and let the glue leak out. And he stopped the leak. And then a while later it leaked again and he squeezed more glue in there and he basically put glue there. Amazing. I mean, I would not have thought of that. But when my tank leaked, my 280-gallon leaked, I could push on the glass and I could see the silicone would get dark when I pushed. And when I let go, the glass lifted away and you could see the air bubbles get even further down. I was like, nope, this tank is done. It's about to let go of the entire panel. I can't do it. And I had to remove it and replace it with a brand new tank. Oh, thank you. Reef Keeper says, yes, the Sixline does cocoon itself. Yeah, it's fun how certain wrasses will do that mucus bubble around their body. It's really, really neat. Bish Bash says, which wrasse doesn't disturb the sand too much? I had a peacock leopard one that constantly covered everything by digging all the time. The leopard wrasse was digging all the time? That's really unusual. I don't know. I mean, I had the mystery wrasse, the melanurus wrasse, the leopard wrasse, the yellow chorus, the lemon meringue. Those are all the wrasses I've had in my time in the hobby, and none of them were diggers. I mean, some of them would swim and hide into the sand, like I was talking about earlier, but that just made like a little puff. But it wasn't like it was covering things with sand. So I guess what you want to do is find out which wrasse you're thinking about keeping and learn more about that wrasse specifically. And then you can maybe get the answer to your question. Aquaball says, I have the Hawaiian red chorus wrasse. He just flips everything. He can flip it to find bugs. He's very cute. He's killed some corals because he flips them upside down. That is probably... that doesn't surprise me. I think that was one of the wrasses I didn't want to get. Also, the clown wrasse. It looks really pretty when it's a juvenile. And then when it's big, it's ugly. And I'm pretty picky about fish. I want them to look a certain way. And so I try to look up the fish I'm curious about. And I learn what it was like as a juvenile, what it's like as an adult, what its temperament is, what its habits are. And like you just described about, flipping things over to get food underneath. I know some fish do that. Matter of fact, I have done that for some fish when I was scuba diving. I'd be looking at something and I'd lift a rock. And all these fish would come out of nowhere to see what was under the rock. Like, what's there? What's there? And it's kind of humorous to me, but at the same time, I might have revealed something and it was nice and safe, and now it's at risk of being dinner. So I don't do it all the time. But usually, like if I'm scuba diving and I see a coral upside down, the crown is face down into the substrate, I will flip it over so that coral has a chance to live, because I'm a coral guy. I love coral. Oh, thank you, Reef Keeper. He says, make sure to rinse the blackworms daily. If not, they rot and smell horrible. All I know is that blackworms can be in a bowl of water in your refrigerator, and they make more of themselves. But I've not had any personal experience because I can't get my hands on any. And when I was younger, I lived with my dad, and we had blackworms in the fridge because we were feeding our saltwater aquarium back then. But it's just so weird that we can't get them here. I don't know. I don't know what the reason is, but it's good to know that it requires that you rinse them out. And I think that makes sense, because I think you're taking some out to feed your tank. You've got to add some more water, and I do seem to remember some of that, so thanks for bringing that up. Protex is saying, I have 2 tanks in the same room. I'm using a recirculating CO2 scrubber on both of my tanks, and I can't get the pH above 8.0 to save my life. It could be... Well, first of all, what are you measuring your pH with? Because if it's a test kit, you'll get one type of reading. A pH probe is going to be more accurate. pH probes need to be calibrated to double check the numbers. And then it comes down to how many things are breathing in the room. If you have a bunch of dogs in the room and your wife is in the room, if you're all in there breathing, you're going to add to the CO2 of the room, and you're just going to be limited to how high the pH can get in the tank. The 8.0 is okay. There's a lot of tanks out there that are living 7.8 to 8.0. There's other tanks that are doing 7.9 to 8.1. My tank tends to be 8.0 to 8.2 each day. But you're already doing what you can. You're using a CO2 scrubber, and that's one method. Bringing in fresh air from outside that goes into the skimmer is another approach. Letting fresh air into the house. I mean, this time of year here, because I know you're here in Texas, opening windows and doors to let in some fresh air, you should be able to see a bump in the pH being higher with fresh air. Also, what you can do is you can take your tank water, you can take it outside with an air stone, and then measure the pH and see what you get. And that'll kind of tell you if your pH kit is working correctly or not, your pH test kit. So that's a way to just double check things. I mean, there's things you can do to buffer it up, but you may raise your alkalinity too high trying to make pH higher. So really, what is the reason for wanting a higher pH other than the number bothers you? How's the livestock doing? Jason points out that the tomato and the maroon clownfish are both very aggressive clownfish. But he said he's never had any issues from Clarkies. I've seen Clarkies. I mean, they're just mean. But definitely the maroons and the tomatoes are biters. But I've had Ocellaris bite me too. Lord Thornton himself says, my Ocellaris I rescued from Dallas North as a nipped up bully bites me constantly. So he was being bit and now he's biting back. The Cardinals survive after swimming into the anemone? Yes, they do. They just stay near it. As Reef Keeper said here, he says they tend to associate themselves near the anemone, not so much in the tentacles, but they hover around it for protection because the other fish are going to stay away from those nematocysts, the stinging tentacles. And so these fish are using it as a shield. They're just being nearby. Fabricio mentions the Regal Angel. Why didn't you mention it? It's one I've never kept, so I don't have any experience with it. And then Sandy says, what about the jawfish? I've never kept it, so I have no opinion on it. JJ's Fish Channel says, I have 2 Royal Grommas in my 90-gallon. I bought them at the same time, and they paired up male and female for 4 years now. That's really cool. I like that. Thanks for sharing that with us. Yes, Thomas, your tank will be okay without a water change for a couple more weeks. I hope your knee feels better soon. Oh, okay. Thank you, Reef Keeper. He says the Boston Reefer Society video is already out. He watched it the other day. Larry says, in your opinion, what's the best clownfish and anemone combination you've seen? I really like the sea bay anemone and just don't know which clownfish to pair with it. Skunk clownfish goes really well with the sea bay. That's what's in my tank, and I've really enjoyed it now for over 8 years. It's really nice. It's so simple and easy. So mine is the sea bay malu, and I put in these tangerine skunks. There's pink skunkfish as well. Pink skunk clownfish as well, and you can put those in and they will just stay right with it. It works out. I mean, it's so easy. And I got the idea from another guy that goes by Reef Keeper 2 online. His name is Paul. He lives in Boston. I saw him at the event last weekend, and his tank, and he still has this giant anemone with the harem of clownfish, and it's amazing. And I got my inspiration from seeing his tank. Ever since, that's what I wanted. And then I finally did it, and I'm really glad I did. Just Another Reefer says, my yellowtail tamarin wrasse buries himself at night in the same spot every time. It's so fun to watch. It's just unbelievable. I remembered when I saw my lemon meringue wrasse, it would, like I said, it would circle this one spot. And I looked up at the clock and I was like, wow, it's literally about that time. And then, I used mechanical timers. And as it went click and the lights went dark, it disappeared. Like I might see the end of the tail just as it went into the sand bed. Lord Thornton says blackworms die within seconds of hitting saltwater. Well, yeah, they are freshwater. And none of my fish seemed to like them, and I thought they were gross, so I ordered some special online. Yeah, but the one fish that does like them, it works out. And you have different techniques for feeding fish. They can be in a feeding ring, they can be in a feeding bowl. There's a lot of different approaches, but really it comes down to what fish are needing it. And in the case here, I was talking about the copper band. Another fish might be the long-nosed butterfly. That's another fish I won't buy, but it's really pretty, and my dad had one when I was a kid. because it eats all the little tiny feather dusters that I like so much, and so I wouldn't buy it. But if I was trying to keep one alive and I could get my hands on blackworms, I totally would do it because that's what that fish demands. But I wouldn't expect Spock to eat blackworms or the clownfish or the pajamas or, you know, my Mandarin. Probably not going to happen. Triggerfish says, how are your pipefish doing? I think they're long gone. I put them in, I saw them that night, and I never saw them again. It's funny how you can put things into your tank and just never see them again. I mean, I thought, oh, they're just being super reclusive. I mean, it would be crazy if I suddenly did see them. You know, like, I haven't seen them in 3 years, and then suddenly I'm working in my tank and there's a pipefish. That would be amazing. Oh, speaking of my tank, so my reef that has been, you know, quietly churning in the background while I've been living my life and being busy doing things every single day, it's desperately in need of a massive haircut. I mean, absolutely ridiculous how badly it is so full right now. But I did want to mention that 6 days ago, while I was out of town, my reef turned 11 years old. And usually I do an anniversary video, but I just don't feel like talking about that tank right now because I'm not happy with it. I mean, it's not terrible. It's fine. Let me see if I can find you a recent picture to throw up on the screen. But it's just not great. And I want it to be great. All right, here. I'll throw this on my computer really quick for you. So this is my reef right now. I'll make it a little bit bigger. Actually, I'll make it bigger and I'll move it across. So here it is on the right end with a hammer coral. And there's some Monty down there. And then we've got some acro and some pavona. And then we got a ton of bird's nest across the top there. And my lithophyllon in the front is still a giant colony. There's some more acro there, and there's the giant Australian tongue coral on the bottom, and then that Lobactis thing on the, which is like a weird fungia, is on the far left corner. And there's some Hollywood stunner on the wall, and some acros growing at the top. And that's kind of my whole reef right now. And that picture I took 2 nights ago before lights out. So, I'm not in love with it. It's actually kind of boring looking. It needs a lot more color. And I think it needs a lot more trace elements, and it needs an ICP test, and it needs me to declutter it of spare anemones and things like that. But other than that, you know, it's doing all right. It's alive. The fish are still swimming. Everyone's eating. That's good. But I've seen it looking better in the past, and right now I'm just kind of meh. I have told you guys in the past, you know, that my reef lives in spite of me, but I also have mentioned in the past that there's probably like 3 weeks out of the year when I love my reef, and then the rest of the time I'm kind of mad at it. I'm not really mad at it, I'm not impressed by it. So, I guess 11 years. I mean, maybe that's part of the problem. I'm not sure. The Achilles is doing great. The Achilles is beautiful, swims around, eats. I try to remember to put in nori a few times a week. I put in some a couple days ago. I was going to do it today, and I used that nori nibbler thing that holds onto the glass with a magnet. But there was an urchin holding on to the nibbler. I was like, ugh. So I was waiting for the urchin to get off of there so I can pull it out, put the nori in there, and stick it on there. And Spanky says, how are the little tanks behind you doing? So that one's doing all right. It's filled with rock anemones. It's got a few other things. But it needs more life in it. And then the little 1-gallon tank is dealing with a cyano bloom right now. It's ugly. I did a water change today. Let's see. Oh, sorry. Oh, hang on. Let me do this. So I'll do this and come down. We'll zoom in so you can see all the cyano. Oh, come on. Sorry, everything's backwards. It's really not going to focus? Oh, it's trying to focus on that microphone. Sorry. Hang on. Give me a second here. See if I can get this thing to cooperate. Man, I wish I could use a different way to control this thing. Well, anyway. Let's do this for a second. Will that help? It's pink. I'm wondering. I'm wondering if I can use ChemiClean in there, but I don't know if that's going to work out. The 1 gallon of water with ChemiClean. How do I do the measurement on that one? I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible to figure out, but I think the medication works with 25-gallon increments, and I'm like, 1 gallon? That's going to be tricky. But the little Blenny is doing fine and gobbles the food up every single time. I kind of think I want to move the Blenny out of the tiny tank and into that tank. I think it'll be nice in there. I think it'll be a good choice. That tank only has the Royal Grama, and it has a Rainford Goby. And it might be nice to put the Blenny in there as well. And hopefully they all get along. And then maybe I should add a fleet of yellow tangs. I'm joking. But I'd like to put something else in that tank, something interesting. I haven't made up my mind. Maybe some Frammer would be nice in there, or maybe a leather, like a toadstool leather or something like that. I don't know. I need some inspiration, but I have all these projects on the back burner that I really want done. So all the tanks are kind of in holding pattern while I'm trying to get projects done, because that is, unfortunately, that is my life. Aquaball says, I have a 200-watt heater in my 120-gallon. It's not keeping the heat up. Any recommendations? Yeah, that's not enough wattage. So if you've got a 120-gallon tank, you need 3 watts per gallon. That's 360 watts, and you're using 200 watts of heat. You basically need 280-watt heaters to get 360 watts of heat. And you could use 2 200-watt heaters, as long as, the reason we're using 2 of them is to make sure that if one heater sticks in the on position, it doesn't have the ability to cook your tank. But for both of them to stick on at the same time is less likely to happen, and so it's safer. So I always try to have 2 separate smaller heaters in an aquarium. But yeah, 200 watts isn't enough for a 120-gallon tank. Yeah, the Fiji yellow leather. That would be a great choice. Anyone got any? That would be a nice one to put in there. There is one, actually there is a toadstool leather in there right now, but I don't know what color it's supposed to be. Aw, Triggerfish says, since my dad died last month, my tank's been running on autopilot with me just making sure supplements don't run out. Luckily it's done well, finally getting back to headspace to give it more attention. Yeah, I'm sorry about your loss. That's hard. I can totally understand that. When it comes to keeping your tank just running when your life is super busy, I mean, number 1 rule is make sure top off is happening, make sure food's going in the tank regularly, and make sure you're cleaning the skimmer. And if you do those 3 things, almost anything can be fine. But then, of course, water testing and knowing where your parameters are and making slight adjustments would be key to keeping everything healthy while you're in your lull. But then at some point when you get crazy and you want to go all in, that's when you'll be more proactive with the entire aquarium. Carl says, did you quarantine the Achilles first? I'm just curious. I did Safety Stop. I've been doing Safety Stop with every new fish since that product came out, I think in 2010. And it's a 2-hour medicated bath. It's a 2-part bath. And it has been my rapid quarantine system that I've been doing ever since. I keep saying I'm going to set up a quarantine tank for new arrivals, and that is going to happen in 2025. I thought it would be in 2024, but here we are at the end of the year. So I'm just going to say 2025 is more realistic. I'm planning to break down the frag tank, remove it completely, put in a new smaller frag tank with a quarantine tank next to it, and that will have something just operational, ready to go all the time for any impulsive buys. And then, yeah, I can, if I get a new fish or I get some Antheus, I can put them in there for a few weeks and then move them into my tank. It seems like Vibrio is the disease du jour that I keep hearing about. Maybe it's because I follow Polo Reef and what they talk about all the time on their social media. But it just seems like fish disease has been a real problem these days for whatever reason. And it's one of the reasons why I don't buy a lot of fish. I tend to buy coral. And I love getting coral because if any bit of it survives, it will grow into something big and beautiful one day. And I really do enjoy that. But I've just been I've not had a lot of time to play with my tanks like in the old days. And it could be because I'm running Me Loves Reef, and I'm also running Coral Magazine, and those two are both time sucks. They're very important, obviously. They are my source of income. So I can't neglect one or the other. Both of them require my full attention. Ooh, what's this say here? Diacanthus Reef says, I use a titration for pico treatments. Example, 25-gallon treatment is 250 milliliters, equals 10 milliliters per pico, 200. Okay. So yeah, that's what I'm going to basically have to do, is I'm going to have to find some way to dilute what I need and use a portion of it. Thank you for bringing that up, so that I can figure out what to do with this little guy. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but it is kind of ugly right now. And I mean, I could leave the light off for a few days, but this room gets sunlight, and that's probably part of it. And then I'm feeding a blenny. I'm feeding a fish in a 1-gallon puddle of water. So of course the nutrients are going to go higher. But today I used 4 solo cups of water to replace what I drained out. Ellery says, I'm going on my first business trip in over 7 years tomorrow. What are your checks before trips these days? Well, number one, don't make any big changes, because invariably, whatever you change, something will go wrong while you're out of town. So, like, in my situation, I want to make sure everything's operational. I want to make sure everything is prepared before I leave my trip. I like to get all my food in individual cups, and I put, I use frozen food. So I put frozen food in multiple containers, and then I put some kind of I use something called press and seal to seal it, and I put those in the freezer. And then the tank sitter will come in each day, take one bowl out, thaw it, and feed the tanks. That's the first thing. I make sure all my top-off containers are filled to the top before I leave town, so all my tanks will get top-off while I'm out of town. I make sure that the protein skimmer, the collection cups, are empty before I leave town, so they don't overflow and put all the dreck back into the system. And you can always do water testing, but it's just fight the urge to make big changes. Like, I wouldn't do a giant water change before I left town. I wouldn't install a brand new pump I've never used before I leave town. If you're going to set up an auto feeder, make sure you've used it for a few weeks before you leave town, that kind of thing. But, you're leaving tomorrow. So right now we just want to make sure everything's okay, make sure whoever is staying with a tank knows what you want them to do and what you do not want them to do. If your lights are on automatic timers, perfect. If you are turning the lights on and off each day, make sure you explain to them they need to come on at 9, they need to turn off at 7, or whatever that is, and never leave them on 24 hours a day, that kind of thing. If they are going to need more top off than what your system holds, you should say this is the jug and mark the jug. This is top off water, so they know only the water from this jug goes into this system. If you're feeding each day, tell them what time to feed, how much food, and having the individual servings is so critical to not having overfeeding. Because if you just say, here's a jar of food, I grab a few pinches, to them, a fistful of food sounds way more fun. And they could end up feeding way too much food to your tank because you didn't individually do the daily dosing. Kind of think of it like the pill trays that say, Sunday through Saturday, and each one has the pill of the day. You want to do the same thing with food, with whatever container you want to use. You could use Ziploc bags, you could use heat shrink bags, you could use the little bowls that I use that individual servings of applesauce comes in, or fruit cups, or pudding cups, whatever. That's been my method for the last 15 years. It just rules out any chance of someone doing something wrong. And then if you are putting saran wrap or something on top of each one, you can write Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And that way they know what to use and avoid overfeeding. If you don't want them to touch the glass and clean it while you're gone, tell them, because you may know that there's certain parts where the corals are too big and you can't move the cleaning magnet or you'll break the coral. But if they're helping you, they're just going to snap things left and right. They may make some big dumb changes. They should know how to get a hold of you if something's wrong. They should have phone numbers to call. If not you, because you're gone, can they call the fish store? Can you set up things in advance with your local fish store and say, hey, my daughter, my spouse, my cousin is watching my tank, but if they have any questions, can they call you? Can you talk them through whatever it is? Can you swing by if things are really going wrong? Just literally plan things in advance would be all the things I would do before leaving town. Having a person with a key to get in your house is really important. and always trying to have that someone trustworthy in your home is also a challenge. You never know who's going to come in. So, find someone you trust and hope they know what they're doing, and don't let them get creative. Don't have them do more than the absolute necessities of keeping your tank alive. But definitely, if there's something wrong, they should text you or send you video clips of what's wrong or what they think is wrong, so you can let them know that's totally normal, or you're right, that's terribly wrong, I need you to do something. And you can talk them through it. And that's what FaceTime is for, and Messenger video. I mean, you can say, show me what's happening. Okay, move the camera to the left 3 inches. Oh, okay, I see there's foam everywhere in the sump. Yeah, over in the closet, I have a bucket with a net. You can scoop the bubbles out with a net. I mean, you can talk them through what's going on. But, yeah, hopefully everything just works out fine and nothing goes wrong. The biggest concern when you travel is power going out and, the tank just being stagnant. That is the worst possible scenario. So if you have little battery backups on your aquarium just to keep even in-tank flow operational, or an air stone bubbling, that would be really better than zero. But just comes down to what's normal in your area, obviously. Protect says, I fragged my willow leather. Well, maybe I need a piece of that. Maybe we should do some frag trading. And I need to get some corals out of my tank. My tank is too full. I need to start getting corals into other people's hands, put some things up on DFW Mass, the club I'm in, and share the wealth. Alrighty. Well, I think we're going to wrap up here today. I just want to remind you guys that today is Water Test Saturday, so be sure to pull out your test kits and do everything. I need to do it myself. I'm way behind on testing. I need to see what's going on with my 400-gallon reef, my anemone cube temporary tank. My frag tank needs to be checked just because the 3 clowns are in there and some leathers and 2 million Mahanos. I need to check on Caitlin's reef. I got to check on the 20-gallon water box. I got to check on the 1-gallon tank that I did the water change on, just to kind of see where things are. But we're talking about double-checking salinity on everything. That's number 1 rule. Make sure that's right. Go around and check the temperature of every tank you have. Make sure that the temperature is right and that it's within range. And then, of course, alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, nitrate, phosphate. And, the rest of it is the occasional ICP test where they can give you all the nitty-gritty about iodine and potassium and manganese and cesium. But if you're trying to just do the basics and you're trying to keep your tank healthy and simple, using the basic test kits should get you most of the big numbers you need to take care of and keep on track. And if you are staying on top of those things and doing testing and verifying that everything is working correctly, great. And if you're not... Oh, and I will mention this in case you hadn't heard. The Maven that everyone's been looking forward to for the Hydros community, that was originally predicted to come out for Black Friday. And CoralView a week ago came out with an announcement video saying nope. So it's going to be sometime in 2025, apparently. They just want to make sure it's working correctly before they release it into the public. So if you're holding out for that, you're going to have to wait a little bit longer, just so you know. I see another question. Kevin says, can I supplement ammonia deficiency with Dr. Tim's ammonium chloride to 1 or 2 ppm without harming the clown? I'm afraid XLM beneficial bacteria is gone by now. It's been 12 days with no ammonia. Sometimes the tank it won't go through like the full cycle you're expecting with like a high ammonia and then collapse and then nitrate. But you might actually have some bacteria in the tank. I mean, you kind of set up this tank rapidly, put a clownfish in there. The clownfish is adding some ammonia just from its existence, and you're feeding it each day. So there is that. It could be a light cycle. It's just not going to be a tank ready to handle a decent bioload. You're going to have to go very slow and gingerly. Now, if you're thinking, I really want this tank to cycle, you're probably going to take that clownfish out and then do what you're describing. Add more ammonia, get a spike, hit 3 or 4 or 5 ammonia, and then let it collapse. But the clownfish has to be somewhere else for a while. It could be in a little quarantine tank, a little hospital tank, a bucket with an air stone and a heater. I mean, there is that. But, yeah, it's always best to not put the fish in until the cycle is 100% complete. That's my advice for you there. All right, guys, have a great weekend. I will see you again next week with a new topic. Bye.